So before we get into this, let me just say that this is not how to cut a wedge mortise and tenon. This is how I do it. So as always in woodworking, there are several ways of doing this, and it's really about finding your own style, what works for you. And I hope you can pick up some helpful tips from this video, but as I said, this is not necessarily the best way to do it, just the way I like to do it. So let's get started. Step 1. Square your lumber. This is really important. If you reference your joints of an unsquare piece of wood, it's going to be really hard to get a nice and tight joint. So I'm lucky enough to have a planer and jointer, but you could use a hand plane, even router, as long as you get your lumber square. Make sure you check all 4 sides, as well as checking that you cut it at a perfect 90 degrees, especially your tenon board. Step 2, cut the tenon. The size of the tenon really depends on the size of the board, obviously. I'm sure there is some sort of formula to find the right size of the tenon or the shoulder, but I don't know of that, and I really don't think it matters. It's really just about what looks good. So in this case, I found that 6mm I think looks pretty good. The tenon, of course, cannot be too small because of the wedges and because it needs some strength. So on this one, 6mm seems to look pretty good. So when finding the length of the tenon, I like to simply put the mortise board, which in this case is 2 laminated 1.5 inch by 3 inch piece of wood. Put them on top, just slide them in until I find what I think looks good. So for me, I like to have the tenons proud, so not flush to the mortise board. So I'm going to have them 2 to 3 centimeters too long, then I'm going to cut them afterwards. So I put the mortise board where I think it looks good, square it up, and then make a mark. Okay, so now we're over at the table saw. I'm going to use the miter sled. I'm just going to put my mark at the right spot. Of course, cut on the right side of the line, and put a stop block like so. Then I find the depth of the blade. Then I start cutting. So once that is done, I move over to the bandsaw and I line up the fence so that the blade hits the right side of the line, so like this, and then I cut all the way onto the shoulder line, making sure that I don't go any further than the line, of course. So I've already made sure that my tenon is nice and square. Now I'm just cleaning up any rough spots without ruining the squareness. Okay, so that was step 2, and step 3 is marking the mortise. So what I like to do then is take the width of the mortise board, subtract the width of the tenon, and divide that by 2. So in this case, this board is 6.3, the width of the tenon is 2.4, and so 6.3 minus 2.4 should be 3.9, and then 3.9 divided by 2 should be 1.95. 1.95, yes. So I bring my marking gauge, set it at exactly 1.95. I'm just going to double check because it has a tendency to drift a little bit when I tighten it. It's still 1.95. Then I just start, put a mark. And here of course it doesn't matter where on the mortise board the tenon is placed, because this is only practice. But if you're going to use it for some sort of table leg or railing or anything, make sure you get this distance right as well. Then I put some nice solid marks on both sides. Then I double check to see if it looks alright. And it looks really good. And then bring a marking knife and I make sure that I cut the wood fibers to get a nice and crisp line. Then the next step is to transfer these marks onto the other side. Then you want to make sure you have the same distance, of course. But then I don't make a mark with the marking knife on the same spots because I gotta make room for the wedges. I'm gonna have 6 millimeters on each side. Then make a mark with the marking knife. And this brings us to step 4, which is going to be cutting the mortise. And I always start out at the drill press, so I found a drill bit that fits. It's not too big, doesn't touch the lines. And I also put a line down the center of my previous marks, just to make sure that I don't go outside of the lines. So when I drill the holes on the side with the wider mortise, with the wider marks, I want to make sure that I don't follow the newest marks, but I'm going to use the old marks. Because there's going to be a taper, so I don't want to go too far out to the sides. Step 5 is the wedges. So I start out by marking the cut line. I'm gonna have mine 1.5 centimeters from the edge. Make a line. Then I'll drill a hole at the end of the cut line to prevent any cracking from going further into the piece of wood. when I've done that, I'm going to cut the slot for the wedges using my Japanese pull saw. So now we have all of the parts ready and it's time to assemble the joint. Okay, so this did not turn out as well as I would have hoped. I actually thought about not posting this video at all because I'm really not happy with this. But I am going to post this anyway because I want to show you guys exactly what went wrong and how I could prevent it. So the big problem really was that I made the gap too big. So I had 6 millimeters. I should have gone for 3, maybe 4 millimeters on each side. And what that resulted in, it gave me 2 problems. One, the wedges turned out too short. I had to knock the wedges in so far to fill the gap that they ended up being not long enough, and I had some big problems getting the wedges all the way in. So off camera I cut the tenon off a bit so that I could get the wedges all the way in, and once the glue dried I cut it flush, then sanded it and put some oil on it. The other problem that I had was it actually ended up cracking in the back. I had to open up the wood so much that it ended up cracking further into the board. So some smaller gaps, smaller wedges would prevent that. Another mistake that I did was that I got a bit too eager when test fitting the tenon. So I thought I could drive it home. It was a bit tight and it turned out it was too tight. So I ended up with a small crack here and a small crack here as well. And that's not good, but really some wood filler in there and no one is going to see that. So I hope you guys could learn something from this, learn from my mistakes. There's definitely room for improvement, as it probably always is in woodworking. I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, please hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button as well. Thank you guys for watching, take care, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.